They say grief makes you hear things. But what if the scratching behind your bedroom wall isn't in your head? What if the tiny, wet breathing and the soft, dragging sounds at night belong to something you were told never existed the first time Lydia heard it? She was folding baby clothes she never got to use. A soft, scraping noise interrupted her grief. Faint, like fingernails brushing the inside of a cardboard box. She paused. Her breath caught mid-sigh and tilted her head. It came again, from the wall behind the closed nursery. She didn't mention it to her husband, Rob. He was already worried, already watching her too closely. But that night, as they lay in bed, she heard it again, faint, deliberate, a tiny dragging sound that started in the hallway wall and stopped just behind their headboard. She held her breath, straining to listen. It wasn't random like a mouse. It was slow, purposeful. Over the next few days, it continued, always between 3:15 and 3:30 a.m. Lydia started setting alarms, creeping out of bed in the dark to press her ear against the wall. Sometimes she heard nothing. Other times, she caught it clearly, crawling, shifting, a soft breath, like a sleeping infant. She finally broke and called an exterminator. He checked the attic, the vents, the insulation. Nothing. No signs of rodents. Probably just the house settling, he said, unconcerned. Rob tried to be supportive, but gently told her she might be hearing things. It's the trauma, he said. Your mind is trying to give the lost shape, sound. Lydia wanted to believe him. But one night, after Rob fell asleep, she sat alone in the dim hallway with the baby monitor still plugged in, out of habit or maybe hope. At exactly 3:17 a.m., a new sound joined the scratching. A soft, distant whimper crackled through the static. A baby's cry. Muffled. Weak. But there. She froze, paralyzed. The sound faded, swallowed by silence. She replayed it in her mind a dozen times. That wasn't a dream. That wasn't imagination. She tore open the wall the next day. Nothing. No signs of infestation. No wires. Just hollow space. That night, the scratching came back, louder, closer. And this time, it stopped with a small thump directly behind the baby monitor, followed by 3 faint taps, like tiny fingers knocking. She wasn't imagining it. Something was alive in there. And it knew she was listening. Lydia hadn't stepped foot inside the nursery since the day they came home from the hospital empty-handed. She had closed the door, turned the key, and buried it in a drawer. But after the sound began, something inside her shifted. A compulsion, maternal and primal, pulled her toward that room. The key was cold when she found it. Her fingers trembled as she turned it in the lock. The air inside the nursery was thick with dust, stale and untouched, or so it seemed. But when she looked closer, the room didn't feel abandoned. The mobile above the crib was swaying, slowly in perfect circles. One of the plush animals lay on the floor, facing the wall. The crib, it was no longer flush against the wall. It had been moved just a few inches. Lydia stood frozen, heart pounding. She hadn't touched that crib in months. That night, she placed a thin line of baby powder on the hardwood floor before locking the door again. It was something she'd read in a book once, a way to detect if anything moved in the night. She set up her phone on video mode and left it charging in the hallway, pointed toward the nursery door. The next morning, the powder trail was disturbed, smudged in the shape of something crawling on hands and knees. But the door was still locked. No signs of a break-in. When she checked her phone footage, the battery had inexplicably drained minutes after midnight. Lydia started sleeping with the baby monitor again. The following evening, she heard a soft clack, the sound of mobile spinning, and then a slow creak. She rushed to the nursery and found the door slightly ajar. She didn't tell Rob. He'd already begun watching her like she was glass. But she started leaving small toys around the room in specific patterns. Every morning, they were shifted, sometimes rearranged into shapes. Once, she found a rattle placed on the windowsill, pointing outward toward the forest behind their house. Later that week, an old neighbor, a woman with cloudy eyes and whispery breath, warned her softly, "That house remembers what was taken, and it always asks for it back." Lydia didn't sleep that night because she had a terrible thought. What if the house didn't want the baby back? What if it never gave him up? Lydia's waking hours became a fog of obsession. She stopped eating, barely spoke, and wandered the halls at night listening for the soft taps, the tiny whimpers, the crawl of something forgotten but very much alive. One night, she followed the sound deeper to the back corner of the nursery where the cries seemed louder, sharper, closer. She pressed her ear to the wall and heard breathing, shallow, strained, right on the other side. That was when she found it. A faint seam in the drywall, barely visible, but lined up exactly where the powder trail had always ended. With trembling hands, she fetched a box cutter and began slicing the wall open. The blade dragged through the sheetrock, like it was skin. A sharp smell hit her. Damp rot, something long decayed. Behind the wall was not insulation, not studs. It was hollow, and inside a small, dark tunnel. Crawling inside was instinct, not logic. She barely fit, knees scraping drywall, hands trembling, heart thudding so loud she could barely hear. But then she did hear. A wet sound, a shift, and then breathing. The tunnel opened into a hidden chamber, no more than 6 feet wide, with warped wooden floors and tattered insulation hanging like cobwebs. On the walls, tiny handprints, hundreds of them, burned into the boards like shadows. In the corner lay old baby items, a rusted hospital tag, a shriveled pacifier, a chewed-up stuffed bear. And then it moved. From the shadows, something pulled itself toward her, crawling. At first glance, it resembled a baby, small limbs, soft skin. But it was wrong, too long, boneless in how it moved. It had no face, just smooth skin where features should be, except for its mouth, a small, gaping, hungry mouthful of sharp milk teeth. It stopped inches from her knees and whispered without lips, "Mommy." Lydia screamed and scrambled out, sealing the wall behind her. She didn't tell Rob. She knew he wouldn't believe her. No one would. How could she explain that something had used her body to enter this world, something not meant to be born? Now, she sits in silence every night at 3:17 a.m., waiting, because the crawling hasn't stopped. And she knows one night it will come out.